Hey, welcome to Truth and Reality. I'm Ashley, and this podcast is dedicated to just that, talking about the ups, the downs, the in-betweens of life, and how God and faith fits into all of it. We are back, and we're here with Melissa.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we are talking about New Year's goals, resolutions, or intentions.
Yeah, I think all of those things, right? And it's probably different for everybody listening today, you know? I think some people are very goal-driven. Some people are very just writing down maybe a vision or a word or maybe a verse. So I think all of it is good. And so we're here today to talk about all the things that we do, and that things that people can implement and use. And I think there isn't a wrong or right way. I think all ideas are open.
Absolutely. Different seasons, I've used different ways of thinking about the new year. We talked last time about how do we process 2024 or the year past? What are we leaving behind? What do we want to bring with us that we've learned? And so the last few years, I have sat down and asked God for a word. That is how I've done it. In years past, I've had goals. I've written them down and revisited them, every 3 or 6 months to see where I was at with them. What have you done in the last few years?
Yeah, typically, probably the last 2 years, I've asked God for a word specifically and then kind of catered my goals around them. Sometimes some of the goals didn't come till midway through the year. And I think even looking back at 2024, some of those things that happened to me this year weren't even things I wrote down. They just were surprising me, and like they were big things that happened. And you and I had talked at a coffee shop just recently about how many big things that happened. So typically I'll start with a verse or a word and take some time to even just ask God, what would he have for me in this season of this year? And so I think it can look different every year. I know you and I have talked. Sometimes it's a verse, sometimes it's a word. And so,
The last 2 years, I've had both.
Yeah.
I feel like I have asked God for a word. In 2023, I had mentioned last time, it was curiosity and presence.
Yep.
And that year, after reflecting on it, was really about learning how to hear the voice of God, being curious, asking God a lot of questions, developing a deeper relationship with God, and then being present with the relationships I had, family, friends, my kids. It was really interesting how those words carried over and what, like, that impact that it had. Last year, mine was family, 2024. That's what the Lord said. Was family. And so then I sat down and I was like, what does that mean? What do you want me to notice? Yeah. And I didn't necessarily have goals, but I felt like he told me he wanted to restore my family, restore my relationship with my children, deepen it, my immediate family, my friendships, and then reflecting back on it just last week, I felt like what I really noticed was not only did my relationships with my family get closer, but my friends became family, right? And then he is growing my nonprofit family too. And I just was really grateful and reflected on just the people that God had surrounded me with in the last year.
I love that. I think for me last year, God really said just to really bring healing in our home. And I didn't know what that meant. And then he said, bring hope. And he wanted to bring hope in a different dimension. And I think hope for me was expecting good things finally. I think after so many years of hard, and not to say there's still not parts or moments that are hard, but I think some of those deep, the pain and grief and loss have fallen in sight. And I think really God has brought a level of healing. So I think in return, he wanted to bring hope and then healing for my kids. And so that was something I didn't know to what dimension that was. And I think throughout the year, I saw God saying, like, take trips with them, be intentional in conversations, get counseling. And so I think healing came in different forms and different shapes. And so it was cool to see that play out this year.
That is cool. It's been fun to watch along the way.
Yes.
So how does that look like? Like, let's talk about, like, if we're going to sit down and ask God for a word or a verse, how do you go about doing that? What does that look like? Do you journal? Does it just pop in your mind? Does it come right away? Is it something that, how do you do that?
Yeah, and I think you and I talked a little bit before this. I don't still have a clear word for this year. I think you do or possibly do in a verse. And so I took time just even last week, we were away, the kids and I, just for the new year, and just took time to reflect on all the good things that had happened last year, and then really wrote some goals for this year. So I don't quite have a word or verse yet, I also am expectant that it will come, and I think sometimes I didn't take enough time, not to say there's a timeline, but just to reflect on all the good things that did happen. How about for you?
Well, maybe that's your thing. Maybe it's not a word. God might not give everybody a word. Maybe goals, maybe intentions, depending on the season of life or where we're in or what he has for us. Because I went to write goals. Because I like tasks. I am task driven. I am like, okay, give me the tasks and I will accomplish them or complete them, and it feels really good. But no, he didn't allow me tasks. I literally wrote, are there certain goals, Lord, you want me to set? And he said, no, you know what you need to do.
He said that.
That's what I said. So when I say God said it to me, it's like that's the thought that comes across my head as I'm writing out the question. It's like, no, you actually know what you need to do. And it's true. I have projects I'm working on for 2025, goals for my health, things that I am working on from 2024. And so I said, okay, well, how about a word? Do you have a word or a verse for me for the year ahead, or a focus or like an intention that you want me to be aware of and set my, sights on and focus on? And I sat there for a little while, and the word that popped into my head was delight. Okay. I want to surprise you. And my immediate thought was, I wrote it down, that feels terrible.
You can see it. I can see it.
This is my actual journal.
That feels terrible.
That feels terrible.
I would have it in bold. That feels terrible.
And delight is a good word. Don't get me wrong. But if you listen to the last episode, I said the thing that the Lord asked me to leave behind in 2024 was this idea of I needed to know.
Yep.
And this idea of control, which really comes from fear and insecurity of not knowing what's going to happen. And so for God to say he's going to surprise me, you'd be like, oh, that should be great. But I was like, that means I don't get to know. Can you just tell me one thing? Can I know one thing? I like to know. That's why I want the goals. These are the things I'm focusing on. That's what I'm moving towards. No, he said, I want to surprise you. The word is delight. And now I went on, this is what I do. I look up the word meaning in the dictionary. For instance, this one is great pleasure, joy. A synonym is joy, a high degree of satisfaction and gratification, which is really good. And then as I sat there, certain Bible verses started popping in my head, so I just wrote them down. Like, delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart. Now, what's interesting is after I did that, I went and read it in the TPT and the verses around it.
Yep.
And so this is really what it is. This is what it is in the TPT, and I like this version of it, because it's not like, okay, I'm going to focus on God, and he's going to give me everything I want.
Yep.
It's, I'm going to focus on God, and as I attune to God in his heart, because he said, I want you to delight in me, God, your kids, your job, your relationships, and be present.
Yep.
And so it's like, as we delight in the Lord, our heart becomes his heart.
I love it.
And then his plans become our plans.
Yep.
It's not just...
intertwined.
It's intertwined. Yep. So this is Psalm 37, and I'm going to read it because I really like it. Okay. It's Psalm 37:5-3 in the TPT. It says, keep trusting in the Lord and do what is right in his eyes. Fix your heart on the promises of God, and you will dwell in the land, feasting on his faithfulness. Find your delight and true pleasure in Yahweh, and he will give you what you desire the most. Give God the right to direct your life. And as you trust him along the way, you'll find out he pulled it off perfectly. And so this was huge for me because the hardest thing has been trust.
Yep.
Trusting, releasing, allowing God to direct my life.
Yep.
And then it says, you'll find out he pulled it off perfectly.
Yep.
I mean, Psalm 139 is my life verse. I never thought it was, but every time I talk about Psalm 139 because it says that all the days of your life have been written in his book.
Yep.
Like he's already mapped them and planned them, and we get to partner with him and walk alongside. And so as I've said that, it's one thing to know that. It's another thing to experience it and then to walk it out.
Yep.
So that's mine. So delight sounds like, well, that's a fun word. You just get to enjoy everything. And for me, I'm like, oh, man.
But I also think delight is so surprise. I think it's like an anticipation. Like you're kind of on the edge of your chair, even though you don't know. And I know you want to know, but just the expectancy where it's like, okay, what, God? I'm curious. What is it? And just trusting him, right? Because you're unsure.
Yeah. And a lot has to do with God has given me things for my nonprofit and things with my kids and, things for school. I'm a teacher. And so he's like, I want you to enjoy the process. I want you to delight and enjoy the process of life that we're going on. Because like I mentioned before, I like to know. And that's a safety mechanism for me.
Yep.
And he's saying, no, you're safe here. Knowing's not the safety. Being with me is safety. Now I want you to delight in it. And actually, it was one of my goals was to have more fun. I'm too serious.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Not knowing, actually, you'll be like more curious and more like adventurous. Like, okay, I'm going to have fun. I'll make sure you have fun. We'll do that together. I think that's a great way. I don't necessarily have a verse, but I think everybody does it different. So I think it's great to see different ways. Is that I just wrote down a new beginning and a new year. And I thanked God for everything he had done in 2024. He brought me freedom. He brought me joy. He brought me hope. He brought me these types of opportunities. He brought restoration. He brought healing. He brought closure. Just some small things. It's like I went through each month what he did. In September, we buried my late husband's ashes. That took me a long time to do, but it was really just a powerful moment. I officiated my first wedding in October, so I was reflecting back. We did the climb together in Colorado, and so it was just cool to see. Sometimes you can look back and think, not a lot of big things happened. And so I think that gets me in a good headspace of like goals and what I'm planning for 2025. I did spiritual goals. I did goals for...
Okay, well, what are some of them? Like, what are some of your goals? First of all, I like that you did the month-by-month thing. That's cool. I've never done that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what happened in October. I'm going to go back and do that.
Well, I think because we can tend to forget. And so I'll leave like a space like September. And sometimes there isn't big things. And then it was like October. It's like not every month something happened.
Well, I think sometimes the small things are like, we didn't just survive. We thrived. Or like, we survived. Like, sometimes that's a victory in itself. But I like that some of the simple things is like, we played more board games as a family or something like that.
We didn't fight. We all got along, right? We picked up pickleball as a family. So that was a big win, you know?
Yeah. What are some of your goals? Like, give an example. Like, what is a spiritual goal?
I just said, you know what? I need to be better at reading my Bible. So I take a great amount of time of having quiet time in the morning and praying and listening to God and worshiping. I don't necessarily dive deep into some of those harder chapters. Like, you know, I can stay in the Psalms. I can stay in the Proverbs. I think really the Lord is challenging me this year to like dig deeper into the Word and to know the truth and, you know, dissect it and pull it apart. To join a Bible study. He's asking me to join like a ladies' Bible study and to grow in my faith with other seasoned believers of growing in my faith. Okay. And I have that time. Just natural goals as far as like physically is like running a 10-miler, working out at the gym, using my treadmill. So, I mean, I think goals can look in travel with the kids, try somewhere new. What else? Build new friendships and meaningful ones, not just friendships. So
do you go through like spiritual, emotional, physical, fun, business, like
all aspects?
Okay. And goals for each of them. Well, currently I don't have any goals. I just have my word, remember?
I would encourage you as your friend to, you know what, just write a couple of down. And I think it doesn't have to be long. And some of them, as you and I both know, can happen throughout the year or happen in the next month or happen in the weeks to come. You know, I'll take this journal with me and it's like I could write it down like I'll think of something like, oh, I want to do that. Or it's like take a girls trip with you or take our kids on a trip or do an overnight at a hotel, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a right or wrong way. So I think both are great and, you know, people have different ways of going about it. So,
yeah. I do think that once you have a word or goal or however you walk through the new year, to revisit it, to write it down, to recall it, I think there's an importance of continuing to bring it to mind, not in a way that's like rigorous, I have to complete this goal, but when you write your goals down, when you recount them daily, when you can visually see them, you're going to be taking more active steps towards them.
Yeah.
I
think that's why I wrote it like on the first page because it was like the minute I open it, I look at it, I'm like, okay, where am I at? And then it's like, it reminds me, I'm like, okay, look what I did last year. Like even just small goals, like you said, just each month, just little things, you know?
Yeah.
Trying to be more organized. That's what I said for January is like purge and get rid of stuff that we don't use. Just small things that are just end up being big wins, you know?
Yeah, I think it's super helpful. It sets a focus. It gives vision. I mean, personally, for me, I take steps forward. I shouldn't say I don't have any goals. I don't have any intentions.
Blank sheet of paper over there, right?
Sheet of paper. I have lots of goals that are written down business-wise, things like that. But I didn't reset goals for this year. Not yet. I think I don't rush into it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any timeline, you know, so that's great. I did this on the trip while we were gone, and so I think it will unfold and it will build into bigger and deeper things. And I'd love a verse that could go alongside it to kind of go right along it with it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, we hope that this was helpful insight into 2 ways to process goals in the new year and setting intentions. We just encourage you to pray through it, to ask the Lord what He has planned for your year, to take some time to really see and assess what are you wanting to bring with you? What did you want to leave behind? What do you value that you want to put energy towards in the new year?
Yes. That's great.
Okay, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Peace Runs Deep, and we'll see you next time.